Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Gulliver's Travels from 1939. And this is the winner of my Patreon movie review vote. If you would like for me to review a movie of your choice, then click on the link below and pledge, and maybe I'll be reviewing your movie next month. When I first got into the Fleischer brothers, I'd been watching their shorts my entire childhood and so forth, but really understood who they were and the history of it. I was always kind of dissuaded from this movie. And I had seen it and I was fine with it, and I guess coming to terms with it to review it, I had to really kind of understand the kind of whole scope of it. The main narrative that I don't really like about this is that it is not really a Snow White clone necessarily. The Fleischers had been trying to make a feature with Paramount Pictures since about 1934 and been asking them to, and it wasn't until the success of Snow White that they were able to, and the studio was like, please make an animated feature. So they made Gulliver's Travels. I don't think it's really a Cinderella ripoff. I think the animation style of Gulliver, sure, I guess, is similar, but everything else feels to me very Fleischer Brothers. Now, not Fleischer Brothers like peak Fleischer Brothers of what was going on and everything like that, and I think that's kind of what demotes it as well, is if you look at the period of the Fleischer Brothers, you're looking at the two reeler Popeyes, or Popeye specials I've heard them called, the Fleischer Superman shorts that would come out after this, and even their other feature, Mr. Bug Goes to Town, and then you look at this and it's sort of disappointing both story-wise and animation-wise. So, I definitely get it, because you watch all of those, and even at the time people felt that way when this came out, even though it was very successful, it being the second animated feature film produced by Hollywood and produced by America, frankly, and the, I think, 11th animated feature film ever made, and the last one, this came out in Christmas in 1939, the last one made before 1940, which is because that's a distinction Wikipedia made. So I think ultimately, where this film lands in terms of its history is why it was both successful and also why it's sort of not that good, because when you go into that context, you're like, oh, this is sort of less than. But before we get into that as much, I think honestly the idea, the concept, the bigger idea of this film isn't a bad one, because it's not all of Gulliver's Travels. It's just Gulliver with the little people, and to my limited understanding of Gulliver's Travels just being the Ted Danson TV movie miniseries, whatever it was, it's more than just that. It's called Gulliver's Travels, and in this he just goes one place. That's just travel, frankly, but whatever. This is just that section. And kind of an interesting idea is it takes more of the perspective of the little people in this town and not Gulliver, which is usually, I know they cut to these other people sometimes in it, I think. This is a very different perspective. They don't really do much with that other than kind of really weird ideas that don't really connect. I don't think you can really connect to this. I've heard this called one of the most attended or watched animated films of all time. I don't think that's true, but it has been widely seen, and the fact that this film is so widely seen and yet so not discussed at all kind of speaks to how not connected you can get to it, because Gulliver, it's his travels, he doesn't speak until about 40 minutes into the film. So are you following the character who finds Gulliver on the beach? You're not really following him, because the film drops him and brings him back up, and then he basically goes into and meets these two kings who are signing a wedding contract because they're weird in a different society, so that's what they do or something, I don't know. And then they go and they sign a wedding contract. When they're doing that, they get into a fight about what wedding song is going to happen, and then they have basically all-out war because of the wedding song, which is totally the same as that Peace on Earth short that came out at exactly the same time. But they're very much simplifying conflict to such a degree it's ridiculous, and it's not really saying much of anything and just kind of being stupid. Then they get into that argument, and so the lovers, who also look a lot like from The King and the Mockingbird, if you've ever seen that short, I'm sure that was referencing this. I'm 100%, and it just hit me when I was watching this one. These lovers who are being torn apart, who don't really speak that much, and then these two kings are fighting, and then the guy who they wouldn't listen to about the giant on the beach, now they are listening to, and then they find the giant, and that is an accurate description of the plot of this film. And that's just the beginning. And then you have a whole tons of animation of them tying Gulliver up, and then when he finally wakes up, them cleaning him up and basically being his servants or something. And This film just jumps around between character to character, but doesn't have like a narrative through line through a certain character. It's not like you see this one character like go up the societal ranks because of his association with Gulliver. You don't see how the society necessarily changes. You just see them kind of going like, hey, conflicts, bad and stupid. The Fleischer brothers are really known for pushing the medium of animation, and their animation is so beautiful and wonderful. It's nice seeing anything that they ever produced, even something like this. I like seeing the flow of it. I like seeing the movement of it. It's fun to watch pretty much anything the Fleischer brothers ever produce, with very little exception, except for, you know, famous studios. Ooh, animation burn. With Fleischer and this, it's like you watch what they did with Popeye, and you had Popeye, like, they would film like a miniature set and have Popeye walk around it. They did a lot of stuff like that. You look at, you know, the detail and the stories of the Superman shorts. There's enough animation, enough good storytelling, even though it might be simplified in either of those cases, that it really gets you through those. And those Popeye two-reelers are considered some of the best things that Fleischer did. The Superman shorts are unquestionably great. But when you get to this, I think the animation is good on a technical level, but it's honestly not even that good on a technical level as the other stuff they were doing. And so in that, when you look at the historical context of it, you're kind of just disappointed by it. Sure, it's a fun film to watch. I mean, this is the only animated film produced in what's considered the greatest year in Hollywood history, and it's interesting to watch this kind of a film at that period. I've never really gotten why people like it all that much. I prefer Mr. Bug Goes to Town. I think that's a much better film, and showcases the Fleischers a lot better. The features would sort of be the beginning of the end of them anyway, because they'd move to Florida, they'd have a lot of infighting, they would break up, and the studio would fall apart and then become famous, and that was the end of it, sort of. And I think they're more known for what they did with Popeye, who originally this was going to be Popeye in Gulliver's Travels, which, to be honest, sounds like a lot better. I think if you had a character like Popeye, that would have connected a lot of this together, rather than like a general, you know, white dude from the late 1930s kind of thing. Like, Gulliver is very uninteresting and very kind of normal, kind of like, oh, it's a guy who is tough and likable in Hollywood. Neat. One of the bigger problems with Gulliver's Travels is there's nothing to connect to all these things, and felt like the Fleischers, who they're having a lot of problems. This one was almost canceled a ton of times because of the production problems, and you can kind of sense that there would be, because the Fleischer brothers knew, and Dave Fleischer, who directed this, knew how to tell a story and how to make animated short, and had been doing so for a very long time. And I think they wanted to continue to push the medium forward, and I often wonder what it would have been like had they gotten to make more features the way Disney did. I always find that to be unfortunate, but this film had a successful release. They made like over $1 million in profit. It kept getting re-released into the 1950s. It played a lot on TV. It's now in public domain. You can find it on YouTube. I kind of feel the way, you know, like real animation historians and animators and so forth have always said to me, like, it's fine, but like watch like all these other Fleischer brothers things first. And if you haven't seen those, just do it. Like, look up those Popeye two-reelers. They're amazing. Look up every Superman short. I believe you can still find them pretty easily. Look up old Popeye or Betty Boop, or like any of that. The Fleischer brothers stuff is really impressive. And I think that this is so much of a less than in terms of their filmography. It's never really lived up to much, but I think because they're so few animated features at this time, I think that is the one thing that makes, that I've talked about before, like in our modern sense, an animated feature isn't as big of a deal as it is in, like, this was the only one made in 1939. This is the second one made by a Hollywood studio. So in that case, it is notable, and it is interesting. You have two different animation styles going on at once. You have someone rotoscoped playing Gulliver, and then you have kind of typical Fleischer brothers animation going on below it. And some people find that off-putting, but I think that's really cool. I actually like that animation to it. It showed like how playful they were. The whole idea that I've talked about, and the whole theory of animation, that anything can happen, that ran through everything that the Fleischer brothers were doing. And it runs through this film, because no one, you know, Disney was not mixing animation styles in their features. They're very consistent, almost boringly so. But the Fleischer brothers weren't interested in that. They wanted to mess with the medium. They wanted to see how far they could push and do different things and be experimental and kind of get away with it. And Gulliver's Travels is experimental in what it's doing with two different designs. No one was really doing that to this extent, especially with a feature. I mean, there weren't that many features, but still, let's give them the credit for it. I like those different kind of animation styles going on at once. I think that adds to it. I mean, the animation in this is good enough to just watch it for the animation. And I think this is the beginning, so I would say up until the 1980s, movies, you can watch features just for the animation. Well, you can watch movies however you want, but you can really just watch this for the animation, and that's still notable, but it's just like so less essential when you look at in its context of the entire studio. I don't understand people's disregarding of this. It does feel like a rushed film. It doesn't feel like they're fine-tuning that Fleischer brothers usually produce, and you can see that in the Superman shorts and everything else they did. Because of its availability and because people don't really want to look up animation history, so cool, they don't really understand that. And I was a little embarrassed looking up reviews of this on YouTube and seeing like the reception of this film, because I don't think it is a bad movie, but I don't think it's really that great either. I just think it's like, it's good for what it's doing, and I think, you know, despite production problems, despite like not a good script at all and all those things, I think they sort of make it a really interesting, exciting kind of Gulliver's Travels adaptation. You know, it's the only one that really has fun with it and does different things with it. Is it like really good or like a narrative that you're going to connect to in any way? No, not at all. Part of me wonders, maybe they realized that wasn't going to happen with this, so they tried to, you know, just have cycles of like, let's have, you know, we're going to dress him and cut his hair, and that's going to be cool animation, or we're going to tie him up and stuff, and we're going to have cool animation there. And like, sometimes I just like watching that far more than like Gulliver trying to help out their discussion about two songs at a wedding or something. Like you have a giant and you're like, let's have him settle this argument. Like, just whatever. I don't remember that being in the Gulliver's Travels story, but I'm pretty sure people like that story, so I don't think they did that in there. If you're an animation fan, check out the Fleischer brothers. Don't stop here. This is almost kind of an annotation sort of thing. Like, you know, if you want to be a completionist, watch this. And that's kind of sort of what it is. The animation is better than that, but that's because the Fleischer brothers were so amazing. But I think the Popeye two-reelers and everything else that was going on in their other feature are more of their legacy. This only has the legacy in being successful and being overly seen and things like that. Mr. Bug Goes to Town, frankly, should have that reception, but because it got literally released right around Pearl Harbor, it didn't work out so good for that one. This, it did work out because it had perfect, amazing timing, and I think, you know, it is not a Snow White clone. That was how they were finally able to get their film made, and Disney barely survived making his film. The Fleischer brothers, obviously there was some hesitation for anyone else trying to make that as well. So I kind of understand the financial reasons this happened, but don't handicap the reception of this film just because you understand when this came out and that came out and very little else. I do find this film kind of compelling in the way that it exists, but I don't find it compelling as a film itself. Anything the Fleischer brothers did is interesting and worth a watch to a certain degree, and I think this is true with this. But not to get all auteur theory on it, but I think they've done a lot better work elsewhere, and I think people should focus more on that than this movie, frankly. I still enjoyed watching it, to be honest, and I think I enjoyed it more this time. I've seen it, I think, a couple of times. I don't remember how many. And I enjoyed it more this time, more appreciating the animation, but also realizing how haphazard this narrative really is. And I think that's honestly the biggest problem with it, is the Fleischer brothers can be experimental, can push animation as far as they can, and they did help push the medium further than almost anyone ever has. But at the same time, you need a good story to be able to push that medium with. And frankly, Gulliver's Travels, despite being one of the great stories in literature, I'm assuming, even though I didn't read it, this movie and this narrative definitely isn't that, but thankfully we have some really great animation to get us through it. So if you have seen Gulliver's Travels and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. And this was the winner of my Patreon movie review vote. If you would like for me to review a movie of your choice, then click on the link below and pledge, and maybe I'll be reviewing your movie next month. Thank you very much for watching.